How's everybody doing?
Good.
Good.
So
Good.
Trying to think a little bit. Please those who were vaccinated started to
I
think
made
a
it,
little bit,
Miri.
start to think, feel a little bit more at ease, perhaps. No, yes.
With the mutation, the California mutation, it's not really easy to think safe.
No, it's
Fair.
not safe
Not
yet,
safe.
for sure.
Very
Yeah.
fair.
Okay.
We all have to go to Israel.
Well, they have. It looks that they're going to have their own mutations now. They have all their own very, very strains or whatever. So it's not that great as well. Anyway, we have a packed show for today. So let's jump right into that. Gonna share my screen and this, see that? Okay. So today we're going to talk about the war against Ammon and the conclusion of the book of Judges. I want to dedicate class to two very special ladies. One is Edith Aronoff. Those who knew her, whenever she walked into Shul, the whole room light up. Wonderful lady. And
Margie.
Family just got up from Shiva today. The other lady is Margie, who was one of our regulars. She was with us actually last Tuesday.
Yeah.
Last Tuesday she was in the class, and then early Thursday morning she just looks looks like a quick heart attack, and that's it. That was Thursday, and
Oh my God.
I can still don't believe that this is very, very shocking, very unexpected. Wonderful lady. And we'll miss them both. So dedicating today's class in their memories. And we're gonna move into our class. So the story of the war, the battle between Israel and Ammon, we find it in Samuel 1 in the 11th chapter, comes right after the description of the anointing of Shaul to become the first king. What happens? Nachash, who was the king of Ammon, he attacks or want to attack the people of Yavesh Gilad. In the past, we spoke about the city of Yavesh Gilad. We're going to talk about it a little bit later. People of Yavesh Gilad. And they could not, and he basically gave them an ultimatum and said, I'm going to conquer you. And they couldn't fight. And they suggested, Korot lanu brit v'na'avdecha. Let's make some sort of a deal and we're going to be your subjects. Nachash, the king of Ammon, he agrees on a condition. What's his condition? I'm going to take away or gouge out every man's right eye. The idea here, of course, that he's not trying just to get them as subjects, he wants to humiliate them, of course. People of Yavesh Gilad, obviously they can't accept it. And what they say is, Heref lanu shivat yamim, give us 7 days, v'nishlecha malachim b'chol gevul Yisrael, and we're going to send for messengers, we're going to ask for help among the whole Jewish people. And if no one is going to help us, none of our brothers is going to help us, then you're going to get your wish. Tells you how difficult the thing was that, and the king of Ammon, the enemy, wants to attack, and nobody is not automatically is there to help them. Every tribe is alone. Every city is alone. There's no cooperation. There's no working together. It's not one nation. It's the completely broken. Eventually, when Shaul, who was just anointed as a king, when he hears of what happened, he immediately gathered an army, and he goes and lead the fight against them, and he is able to be victorious and against Ammon. And at that point, they have another another coronation or whatever, another anointment of Shaul, more in a more public way. And that's basically the beginning of Shaul as the king of Israel. Okay? Now, this is the story. But in this story, we find a lot of similarities to the story of Pilegesh Bagiva, the concubine from the hill. We learned about her in the past. I want to go back and talk about that story. Here, now we're here. This story appears at the end of the book of Judges. A man from the tribe of Levi who lives in the Nachala, in the territory of Ephraim, in Har Ephraim. He has a concubine. She's from Beit Lechem. For whatever reason, we're not sure exactly, she decides to run away from him. Maybe he abused her, who knows what. And she runs away back to her father's home in Beit Lechem. And she stays there for 4 months. After 4 months, I guess this guy missed her, and he goes back and tries to convince her to come back home. After staying a couple of days in the concubine's father's house, and he's trying to kind of like kill the time. Stay another day, whatever. Okay. Eventually, I guess she's convinced or whatever. They go back, start the way back, all the way back to home, to Har Ephraim. So the man, the Levite, and his concubine, and they start moving north towards Har Ephraim. What happens? It was dark. And since it was dark, they could not continue. So they had to stop for the night. And they were by Yevus. Yevus is Jerusalem. And at that time, it was a Jebusite city. And the Levite, that person, decided he's not going to stop in Yevus because it's not a Jewish city, probably not safe, doesn't want to stop there. And they continue to the tribe, to the Nachala, the tribe of Binyamin, because he wants to spend the night in a Jewish town. Okay, so they get to some sort of a hill, and that's already the tribe of Binyamin. And they're waiting in the street, and nobody is inviting them home. Finally, one older guy that coming from the field decides to take them home, give them food, drinks, and whatever. And while they're still eating dinner, the people of that Ramah, of that town, come to the house and demand to take the man out in order to do something to him, to abuse him, to rape him. Whatever, there's a lot of interpretations. And the host begged them not to do that. And instead, what he does, he offers his own daughter and the concubine of the guest. Even though the mob refused to that offer, the Levite take his concubine and send her out, basically kick her out of the house, where the angry mob abuse her for the whole night, probably, raped her and abused her. In the morning, he opens the door and he sees her basically fainted at the entrance to the door. And he sees her, he tells her, get up, or whatever. He sees that she doesn't respond. Probably she's dead at that point. He takes the body back home, cuts up the body for 12 pieces, and send it to each tribe. The nation is beyond words. Everybody is completely shocked, and everybody is gathering together, the whole Jewish nation, and they demand they demand from the people of Benjamin, of the tribe of Benjamin, to give them those people, the people that are responsible for the death of that young lady. The people of Benjamin refuse. And what do? They declare war against the tribe of Benjamin. And the Jewish people said that anyone, please
Hi,
mute.
Esther.
Hi, how are you, my dear? Long time no see, no talk.
Guys, it's very difficult for me to try to control who is muted and who is not. So you could do me a favor. There, I did that. Okay. And what they do is they declare war against the tribe of Benjamin, and they say that anyone who does not join the war against Benjamin is going to die. Not only that, they take an oath that no one, i.e., no Jewish person, is going to give his daughter to be married for somebody from Benjamin. And whatever, the war was going on and whatever, in the beginning, the tribe of Benjamin was victorious. At the end of the day, later on, the rest of the tribes were able to defeat the tribe of Benjamin, and only 600 people from the tribe of Benjamin remained alive. After that victory, the people realized that a whole tribe is going to disappear, because even though they have 600 men left, no one will marry them. And if that's the case, they're not going to have any continuation. So what did they decide to do? They decide to actually fulfill that oath that they made, meaning that anyone who did not participate in the battle is going to die. So what happened? The people, they make investigation, and they discover that that the people of Yavesh Gilad did not participate in the war. And therefore, the Jewish people go onto war or to battle against the people of Yavesh Gilad. That's, against their brothers, the people from Yavesh Gilad. And so they kill the men, and what they do, they take 400 girls. And those girls are going to be given to the people of Binyamin, who just lost. So that takes care of part of the problem. Because as you remember, I said there were 600 people from Binyamin, and only 400 girls. So you still need brides for 200 men. What do? They take advantage of the holiday in Shiloh. I don't want to go into that too much, but we spoke about it a little bit. Basically, 200 girls were dancing in the fields of Shiloh, and then those 200 warriors from Binyamin, those 200 men, kidnapped, so to say, those girls. So technically, nobody gave his daughter to the people of Binyamin, because those people of Binyamin, they took by force, so to say, those girls. Okay? So this is how they take care of the problem of the oath. Okay. According to most of the commentaries, this story, and that's the end of the book of Judges, this story comes to express that this is a very difficult situation. Brothers fight brothers. Things were really bad because there's no king. Bayamim ha'em en melech b'Yisrael. There's no king. Ish hayashar be'enav ya'aseh. Every person for his own. Everybody does whatever they wanted. An anarchy. And of course, that this story, even though that's not really what we're trying to do today, but this story reminds us, the story of the concubine from the hill reminds us another story that we're familiar with. Of course, that's the story of Sodom. The story took place, of course, many, many years before. Again, we're talking about guests who arrived in the city, and nobody takes them home except for one person. This time it's Lot. And as soon as they're home, the people of the city, the people of, in that case, Sodom, demand to do something for those guests. They demand them, and the host refuses, and instead he offers his own daughters, just like in the case of, from the book of Judges, the concubine and the host daughter. Up to here, the two stories, the one from the concubine from the hill and the story of Sodom, is very similar. From that point, it's very different. God intervenes, and the angels and whatever, and Sodom is destroyed. It becomes a very different story. Obviously, the person, whoever wrote the book of Judges, or at least that part of the book of Judges, knew the story of Sodom. And so the question is, what is the message? Why it was written in such way. And I think this is pretty clear. I think that he wanted the story of the concubine from the hill, wanted to warn us that the fact that we're Jews doesn't save us from making moral mistakes. Remember, Sodom is the worst of the worst. That is the definition of a place that is beyond reckoning, is beyond repair, needs to be destroyed. Every person, I think that's what it's trying to tell us. The fact that we have the Torah, the fact that we have that we're Jewish and all that kind of stuff, doesn't make us better if we're not going to take things into our own hands. Meaning, we have the potential of becoming just like Sodom. We can become terrible monsters like the people of Sodom. It means that every society, even the Jewish society, can find itself without any moral and without any rules or any observance of any morality or anything. And it's a whole society. And what is, perhaps, what is the reason for that? Vayhi bayamim hahem umelech en beYisrael. There's no king, that means there's anarchy. And in that reality, society can become extremely okay. Now, but let's go back to our story, which is the war against Ammon and the story of the concubine from the book of Judges. So I said that there are a lot of similarities, and especially with this idea of Yavesh Gilad and Binyamin. Those two places, the place of Yavesh Gilad and the hill in Binyamin, are connected or appears in both stories. And here's what we have. Seems based on the book of Chronicles and other places that there were some sort of a relationship, some sort of a family, prior kin relationship between the people of Yavesh Gilad and the people of Binyamin. That is the reason, probably, why the people of Yavesh Gilad did not join the war, the battle against the tribe of Binyamin. That's to start with. Then, if you remember, there are 400 girls from Yavesh Gilad that marry people from Binyamin. That means 400 families connecting those two places, those two groups. And we mentioned that before, according to some of the commentaries, Shaul's mother was one of those girls. That means that Shaul himself had relatives on his mom's side in Yavesh Gilad, which probably explain his willingness and his leadership, that he jumps into the battle as the first thing that he does as a king, something that we do not see for the rest of his career. He's motivated, while everybody else refuses. So you got to ask yourself, this is not part of his personality. What is going on here? Why is he doing that? Probably because he has relatives in Yavesh Gilad. Third point. I'm going to jump into the end of his life. So Shaul dies in the battle against the Plishtim. And what happens is that the Plishtim refuse. I mean, yes, he commits suicide because he doesn't want to be captured, but that's in the battle against the Plishtim. But the Plishtim takes the body and they refuse to return it. And the only people that do that, retrieve the body, is the people of Yavesh Gilad. They hide, they sneak into the camp of the Plishtim, and they take the body of Shaul and Yonatan and give them Jewish burial. And not only that, they also mourn the death of Shaul in something that is similar to our Shiva. It says that they fasted for 7 days, etc. So we see that connection between Yavesh Gilad and Binyamin. Okay, but let's zoom in into the two stories and find the similarities. So first of all, just like kind of a little explanation about the picture, Ammon is roughly where Jordan is today, right? When we say Amman, right? That's the capital. Amman is the capital of Jordan. That's Ammon. Amman is Ammon, right? Just like put the geography in perspective. Okay. The way in which So what are the similarities between the two stories? The way in which the whole people were called to action by Shaul and by the Levite, calling them for war against Binyamin, and by Shaul for war against Ammon is very, very similar. They take a body, right? The Levite takes his concubine's body, cut it, vainatcheha, cut it to 12 pieces and send it to all over. What does Shaul do? Shaul does something very similar. He takes a צמד בקר וינתחהו וישלח בכל גבול ישראל. He takes 2 bulls, 2 cows, whatever, cuts them up and sends to all Israel. So yes, we're not talking about cutting up a body, but but rather an animal, but it's very similar. Same location. Story is happening in there are 2 centers. One is Yavesh Gilad, one is the hill, which is with Binyamin. Both stories describe something that is a disgrace for the nation, right? It says on the story of the concubine from the hill, it says, Ki asu zimau nevala b'Yisrael. Zimau nevala b'Yisrael, disgrace. And parallel to that, what Nachash, the king of Ammon, is trying to do by gouging out the right eye of every man in Yavesh Gilad is v'samtia cherpa al kol Israel. Okay, I want to disgrace all the Jews. In both stories, we read about the fact that the nation cried, vayivku lifnei Hashem, or vayisu et kolam vayivku. Okay, this element of crying. Another point is, in both places, we have a very similar term. It's called ke'ish echad, as one man, meaning unity. And people gathered ke'ish echad. Vayitzu kol bnei Yisrael v'tikah el ha'edah ke'ish echad. They gathered like one person, right? Or in the story of the war against Ammon, vayipol pachad Hashem al ha'am vayitzu ke'ish echad. Again, one man in both places as a description of unity. Okay, after they were promised the help, the people of Yavesh Gilad approached the Ammonites, and they say, okay, we'll accept your terms, right? And they say, "Vayomru anshe Yavesh, machar netzeh alechem v'asitem lanu kechol hatov b'einechem." Of course, it's a trick, right? Because at that point, they already know that they have the backing of the whole Jewish nation with Shaul, and they're going to go to war. They're trying to buy some time in the meantime, right? But this term of "Asitem lanu kechol hatov b'einechem," you do to us as you wish, and that is very similar to the language that the old man, the host, uses for the people of Binyamin in the story of the concubine. He says, "Hine v'tia betula ufilagsheu otzia na'otam ve'anu otam ve'asu lahem hatov b'einechem." You can do as you wish to my daughter and the other girl, the concubine, as you wish. So it's a very similar term here. Of course, it's very different circumstances, but same term. And then the last point, when the people of Israel heard about the story of the concubine, what happened there, they demand from the people of Binyamin justice, right? And they said, "Nu et ha'anashim b'nei Belial," give us those people, those horrible people who did that, Unemitem, because we want to kill them. And not only that, the people of Binyamin said, "Velo avu bnei Binyamin lishmoa bekol achehem bnei Israel." However, the people of Binyamin said, no, we're not going to give those people up. Okay. Parallel to that, in our story, the war against Ammon, the nation says to Shmuel, "Mi haomer Shaul imloch alenu tenu anashim unemitem." Who says? Who is this Shaul that tells us, give us people so they can die? Uvnei Belial amru ma yoshienu ze vayvuzu velo yaviu lo mincha. So they refuse, and those people said, who is this Shaul he's gonna save us? Who is this? People didn't accept him in the beginning. And of course, here, Shaul, who is the representative of Binyamin, just to remind everybody that Shaul comes from the tribe of Binyamin, he refuses. What does he say? Lo yumat ish bayom hazeh, ki hayom asa Hashem tishua b'Yisrael. No one is going to die today. So we see all those similarities, and now we have to ask ourselves, what's the meaning of that? I think what's going on here, that Sefer Shoftim, the book of Judges, ends with description of very, very difficult situation, very, very difficult, problematic state that the Jews reached. It includes the three cardinal sins: Avodah Zarah, idol worshipping, Shfichut Damim, murder, and Gilui Arayot, incest, or prohibited relations. The Avodah Zarah, the idol worshipping, we know it's, for example, is the statue of Micha. We spoke about it, but there's a lot of idol worshipping at that time. Gilui Arayot, the idea of prohibited relations, that's the whole story of the concubine. And Shfichut Damim, murder, that's the story of the war against Binyamin. And the recurring theme and the explanation for that terrible situation, because these are the three worst sins in Judaism. These are the only sins for which the Torah says, Yeharegu val ya'avo. Someone should give up his or her own life and not commit those sins. Nonetheless, this is the reality. This is what's happening at that point in history. The explanation is, in those days, Israel had no king. All the people did whatever seemed right in their own eyes. Now, that is the story of the concubine. But our chapter is the antidote. Well, we say that everything, this terrible situation occurs because there's no king. Well, guess what? In our story, the war against Ammon, we do have a king. Yay, right? We have a king, Saul. And actually, this chapter 11, is the most positive chapter in the whole history of Saul. And he describes the beginning of the fulfillment of the promises and the hopes that the Jews had from having a Jewish king. So that means the relationship between the two stories is a relationship of contradiction, or the antidote. If things were so bad, they reached rock bottom because there was no king, well, now there's a king, and the king is going to save us. And not only the king is going to save us, the king is going to change everything. Right? So we're not going to cut up a body, but we're going to cut up cattle instead of a body. When people are going to be crying, this time their cry will be answered. And that's exactly what happened. The people of Yavesh Gilad cried for help, and there's somebody who actually come and help them. Unlike the previous story. There's not going to be any disgrace, nevala Israel, but rather when somebody is going to disgrace the Jewish people, there's going to be somebody, i.e. the king, is going to protect the people. So it's going to be a protection. The people of Israel, yasfu ke'ish echad, they're going to gather together. There's going to be, again, it's going to be ke'ish echad, there's one man. It's going to be unity. But this time it's not going to be brother against brother, but rather it's going to be against a common enemy. There's going to be justice, right? When they say, Katov be'eneichem, do as you wish, this is not going to be against brothers, it's going to be as a trick to win a war against a common enemy. There's going to be justice, and there's going to be smart leadership that will enable victory against the enemy. So after a failure and a failure and a failure, which is the whole story of the book of Judges leading to the climax, the worst of what's happening in the nation, which is the story of the concubine, the end of the book. Why is this? Because there's no king. Well, guess what? Now we have a king, and everything is going to be exactly the opposite. Everything is going to be amazing. All the downfalls, everything negative is going to become positive. Right? Well, that's not going to last, because Shaul starts well, and that's what happens, in the beginning. But from that point on, he is going to decline. So the question is, why? And here is more my thoughts and perhaps some psychology rather than something that is based on the text. We often think that changing the reality is going to change everything, right? Things are bad because we have no king. That means if we have a king, everything will be amazing. There's going to be order. Maybe. But things are not going to get better if the people aren't going to change their ways. Maybe for a short while, it's going to be some sort of a relief. Things are going to be good. But if the change is not internal, is not genuine, if the change does not force the people to change the way they think, what they believe, how they act with each other, it's something external, like having a king or not having a king, then it's not going to change, really. It's not a real change. I really like those two quotes. Change is the end result of all true learning. Only if you really learn, you make the decision on your own, then you can create a change. And in a similar way, I'm just going to move this thing here so I can read that. Everything depends on inner change. When this has taken place, then and only then does the world change. Don't expect things to change before the change happen within yourself inside. By the way, this is exactly the opposite of what Albert Einstein said. Albert Einstein has the opposite, meaning he says that the change inside will occur as a result from the change outside. Okay, again, he was a great physician, perhaps a physicist, but I don't think he knew that much about the human soul. Bnei Israel, think about it. We just, this coming week's Parsha, we're going to read about the golden calf, the sin of the golden calf. What happened? Bnei Israel, just like moments ago, said Na'aseh v'nishma. They just now accepted the Torah. They just received the 10 Commandments. Moshe goes to Mount Sinai. He disappears for 40 days, and they're already dancing for a golden calf. How that's possible? Because the change did not really occur. They did not really accept all those things. They still, yes, they said Na'aseh v'nishma, but they didn't really internalize the new reality of accepting the Torah and following that lifestyle rather than the mentality of slaves that they had. Just a couple of days after receiving the Torah, they're already bound down to a golden calf. How that's possible? The first commandment, Anochi Hashem Elokecha, Lo yeh lecha elokim acherim al panai. Well, if it doesn't come from the inside, it's worthless. Even all the miracles in Mount Sinai are not going to do the trick. Right? It's like, if I'm not going to be convinced myself, if I'm not going to be fully committed, for example, for a diet, I'm not going to lose weight. I'm not going to change my lifestyle. If I'm not committed to that, whatever that is, it's not going to work. It's not going to work. It doesn't matter what, sometimes it happens, unfortunately, like, people like whatever, they have a heart attack or whatever or something, and they go to the doctor says, listen, you have to stop whatever. You have to start exercising. You have to eat better, whatever, stuff like that, right? And the person says, yeah, of course. I just just had a heart. Listen, if that incident created a true change, like, internal change, something that I really believe in, then yes, I'm going to change my lifestyle. But if not, if I do it because the doctor told me, if I'm not really convinced, I'm not going to do that. Maybe I'll do it for a week, a month, a year, but then I'm going to be off the wagon, right? A real change is something that has to come from the inside, right? If I only won the lottery, I would spend more time with my kids. I would give more tzedakah. I would do more charity. I would learn more Torah. If only I had $1 million, whatever, or whatever the lottery, 300 million. Yeah, baloney. Nothing is going to change. It's something that is external. It's not going to change because you're not committed to that. The same goes for what our story. If we only had a king, things were we've been living in utopia. All those bad things are happening because we didn't have a king. It's anarchy. Well, guess what? Not only did the Jews have a king, things didn't change. Right? We learned throughout the book of Melachim, throughout the book of Kings, that not only things were at most of the time, things were pretty bad, except for the times of David and perhaps part of the time of Shlomo. The rest of the time, things were bad. And not only that, the king himself was Mr. Evil. The king himself was a person, like for example, a guy like Ahab, right? We learn about all those wonderful kings that we had. You know, they were all involved with all those terrible things. So if there's one thing that I think that the story is trying to teach us is kind of like a threefold. One, you need to understand that anyone, every society, even a Mamlechet Kohanim Begoy Kadosh, even God's nation can fall to become without any morality and the worst place on earth, just like Sodom. That's number one, and this is the similarity to the story of Sodom. Number two, don't think that an external change, like having a king, you know, it's going to fix the problem. If it's not going to be something that you believe in, something that comes, that is internal, that you really believe in that change and you want to do that change, then it's not going to make any difference and it's not going to do anything. That's all I have to say about this. Next time, we will discuss a very interesting story. I think the similarities between the golden calf, the sin of the golden calf, and the failure of Saul, of King Shaul in the Gilgal. It's two fascinating stories, and I think that there are a lot of very interesting similarities, and see if we can learn something from that next week. Okay.